Have you ever felt like you're not making progress in your guitar journey? Or maybe you feel like you are making progress, but it's not quite as fast as you'd like? If you're new here, my name is Diego Alonso, and I've been a professional classical and flamenco guitarist and teacher for over 20 years. My guitar journey has been pretty difficult. I had a lot of serious setbacks, and it took me a master's thesis on expert practice strategies and plenty of years of additional research to finally understand a lot of the nuances of effective practice. The reason I made this YouTube channel and videos like this one are actually to help musicians like you build a more efficient path to playing well and hopefully avoid the same struggles that I went through in my path. Today what I want to do is just do a really quick lesson to clear up some misconceptions about what progress is supposed to look like in music practice, or I guess really the development of any skill for that matter. I also want to share some tips that can help you develop more realistic expectations for your progress and hopefully help you minimize frustrations that are super common in the practice room. When we talk about progress in music, I think most of us think of like more of a steady upward climb, right? So you practice one day, you get better. You practice the next day, you get better. But the reality is, I think, much more complex and really, I think, a lot more interesting than that. What I want to talk about first is something called the eureka effect as it relates to music. This is the effect that happens when you suddenly feel like you've made a huge leap forward after a lot of work. Like maybe you've nailed a difficult passage you've been working on for a while, or maybe your tone has improved dramatically, your expression, whatever. Just something clicks after a lot of time and you don't know why. Just from one day to the next, you just all of a sudden got better. Now, these moments are awesome. They feel really great. But of course, there's a catch, which is that they are usually, almost always, followed by periods where you feel like you're not improving at all, which are plateaus, or sometimes you maybe even feel like you're getting worse, which are valleys. Now, the good news is that plateaus and valleys in music practice and progress, and really, again, I think for basically any skill, they're not only completely normal, but they're also extremely necessary for progress. And I know that might sound crazy, right? How can that be important for progress if I feel like I'm getting worse? Let's break down what's really going on during our path to improvement. So progress in music learning, and again, pretty much every skill that I'm aware of, typically follows what's called a step function, rather than a nice and neat and unrealistic linear function that we would all love to experience. The step function is more like a staircase rather than a smooth incline, and the flat part of the stair is where we practice and practice and practice, seemingly without improvement, and then the vertical part of the stair, which is the riser, that's when something clicks and we make a noticeable jump in skill and we have our huge eureka moment and yay, and everything's great. So after that happens, that usually is followed by another plateau, another improvement, plateau, improvement, etc. But of course, there's a twist, which is that every so often a flat part of our staircase or our stair is a bit saggy, which can lead us into a valley, and that's where we feel like we're getting worse. Now, at face, of course, that's super frustrating, especially if you put in tons of hours into practice before this happens, but that's really where most of the learning and improvement takes place. We usually plateau or valley for a few reasons. The first reason, I think, is maybe we'll call it the ideal reason. That's when we can play our current material so well that our body and brain essentially redefine our current level as our new baseline. But of course, we still want to get better. So to get out of that plateau or that valley, what we need to do is add just a little bit of variation or challenge to what we're already playing. What happens when we add new variations or challenges is that this usually obligates us to slow down in order to make an adjustment to the new challenge, which makes us feel like we're in a valley. Basically, what's happening is that we're taking 2 steps forward. We add the challenge, or we get to baseline. Then we take 1 step back after we've added the challenge. We work on overcoming the challenge, and then we take 2 more, maybe even 3 more steps forward. Okay? So the second reason why we may plateau and valley is actually because we may be challenging ourselves way too much, and then our brains can't even organize the new information effectively because we're making too many mistakes, and then we have some corrections. So the brain it ends up kind of with a jumble, a bag of corrections and incorrections, and doesn't really know what to do with any of that information. One thing that I recommend is just write things down in a practice journal, so that way you can see your progress weekly. If you feel like you're not progressing as much as you think you should, then the first thing that I would really suggest to do is to take the level of your challenges down a notch and see if that makes a difference. Remember, the difference is not going to happen in a day. Usually, for most skills, especially fine motor skills like this, it's going to take a couple of weeks to notice some differences. So be patient. I think that's just part of the whole thing. We always want to really be patient with that. At the end of the day, the key is really to succeed more in the practice room than to fail more in the practice room. Basically, you want to have more correct results or repetitions than incorrect ones. So I made another video that I'll have linked in the description below where I talk about how many times to repeat a particular correction of a phrase or a challenge. And that could break that down. But the bottom line is we want to always end with more successful repetitions than incorrect repetitions of a particular challenge. Now, reason number 3 is oftentimes because we're not being strategic in our practice. So this is where we want to learn and get better at a particular piece of music or phrase or whatever, and we just keep repeating it over and over again without much thought or strategy as to how we want to overcome our challenges. Maybe we just blow past our challenges and repeat over and over and over again. We want to be very strategic by doing several different things, one of which is that when we run into an error or challenge, we want to stop immediately. So that's the first thing. We want to identify that error, figure out the cause, figure out a possible solution, implement the solution, and then get some kind of feedback. So you can give yourself feedback if you missed a note and you hit the right note. That's obviously your feedback. Sometimes we can't figure out the feedback by ourselves, so we need maybe a recording device that we can listen to or watch afterwards that can give us feedback as well. And we also can reach out to teachers or colleagues that can listen to us play or watch us play and give us feedback on the correction that we're trying to make. So the last reason, or reason number 4, is often because practice is irregular and inconsistent. So for example, if we practice every day for a week and then take the next week off, then essentially our brain begins to forget all of that information that we learned in our first week when we practice. And then when we go back to practice, we essentially have to relearn it. So we make improvements, forget, and then we're gonna go back, make improvements again. The same kind of thing happens if just our practice is irregular. So if we practice 2 days on one week, and then 1 day the next, and then 3 days the following, and then we don't practice for a week, and then we do it again, and it's just kind of all over the place. The brain, again, it doesn't know what to do with all that information. And at the end of the day, what our brain and bodies really need for learning to be effective is consistent input of the newly learned information, especially correct information, in order to create and effectively consolidate all that newly learned information into long-term memory. So one thing you can do is keep track of your practice time in your calendar or a practice journal, and then do the best you can to be as consistent and regular with your practice as possible, even if that means that your practice time is short. Even if it's just 15 minutes, can you do 15 minutes 3 or 4 days a week all the time? That's going to be way more beneficial for your learning than it is if you just do some like an hour one week and then 30 minutes the next week and so forth. So let's come up with an action plan. Number 1, what I would highly recommend is to set short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. This helps you see your progress even and especially during the plateau or valley periods. Short-term goals are things like what you're going to do in your current practice session, and more specifically, what challenge you have run into and what you're going to do to overcome that challenge. Another kind of short-term goal could be what you're going to do that week, what pieces you want to cover, what challenges you want to overcome, etc. Midterm goals for me are usually like 2 to 3 month goals where maybe I hear a piece that I want to learn and I write that down. It could be a short piece that I know is attainable for me and I think it's beautiful and I want to play that piece within the next couple of months, maybe slowly and smoothly, and enjoy the music. And then a long-term goal could be something like usually 6 to 18 months down the line, which, by the way, this is how long some things will take in music. Let's say I want to play a piece like Guajira de Lucia by Paco de Lucia. If you're not familiar with that piece, super awesome piece, but extremely hard. So that could be for me like a 12 to 18 month piece, just to be able to learn and get it to a decent level where for me it feels comfortable, it feels musical. Or I don't know, La Catedral by Barrios. That could be another piece that's another difficult piece in the classical genre. Those are long-term pieces, right? So I want to have those in mind and written down just as motivations, but just having some kind of clear goals in mind, in place, those again are going to help you stay motivated during the plateaus. It's going to help you, especially for the short-term goals, keep track of what's going right and what's going wrong so that you can get out of those plateaus. Now, I mentioned writing things down. This is where a practice journal is going to come in mind. Again, you want to note in your practice journal not just your goals, but I would highly recommend writing down your successes, like how successful you were at overcoming a challenge, how close you were to accomplishing your goals, or did you accomplish your goal, what new challenges that have come up, what steps you took to overcome the challenges. You can write down, for example, your beats per minute that you want to attain and the beats per minute that you're actually at that moment, etc. There are a lot of different things that we can write in a practice log. As long as you write something down, you write your clear goals down, clear solutions to challenges, etc., then you can spot trends over time, and that will help you see when you're in a plateau, when you're in a valley, and then you can take strategic steps to get out of that plateau or valley. Number 3, please don't get discouraged by plateaus and valleys. Remember, I think it's important to embrace them and remind yourself that this is where most of your learning effort occurs and where the brain is doing some really important behind the scenes work to help you get out of those plateaus and valleys and get to the next level. Number 4, set realistic goals, specific goals, make sure they're attainable, right, for your current level. So I know that can be difficult to assess. One way that I like to do that is to find a piece of music or play a piece of music and see if the challenges that I'm running into are just outside of my comfort zone, or if maybe they feel near impossible. If they're feeling near impossible, that's way beyond my current level, then I need to take it down a notch. If I can get through that challenge in like a minute, then obviously that's too easy. That's just within my comfort zone, and I don't need to worry about that. But if it takes me a little more effort, right, to do that, and I can get it by the end of my practice session, right? I'm not talking about at my performance tempo, but just I'm able to overcome the challenge in a musical way, in a mechanical way, memorization, cognitive way, in one practice session, just one challenge, not the whole piece, right? Just one challenge. Then I feel like those are attainable goals that are realistic, right? And they're within my level. They're just past my comfort zone. If you feel like you're making a ton of physical effort and something's not working, then that is a clear sign that whatever you're working on is too difficult for you at the moment and you need to take it down a notch, okay? Here's a tip that has helped me tremendously over the years, which is to record yourself and listen back immediately in your practice session. That's gonna help you spot errors and improvements that maybe you didn't notice while you played. As performers, when we play a piece of music, we're pretty bad at picking up all of the errors and all of the successes that we're looking for. Recording them and watching them back is going to help us find them, and that's going to help us take steps to progress a lot better. Let's take a look at some important points to keep in mind. Important point number 1 is that as long as your practice is consistent and regular, you will make progress. The second thing to keep in mind is that progress is not just mechanical, it's musical and it's cognitive as well. So there's 3 components always to keep in mind. And just know that if you're working strategically, you're going to make progress in one of those, or maybe 2 or 3 of those at the same time. The next thing is number 3 is that there are always external factors that can affect your progress. One of them is stress. Of course, there are lots of different reasons for stress. It could be unrelated to music. It could be related to music. No matter what the stress is, if there's a lot of stress, it's going to distract you from your practice, which is going to slow your progress. The second thing is perfectionism. Perfectionism is one of those things that's a bit ironic, right? We may feel like if we're kind of perfectionist sort of about it, we're gonna accomplish our goal faster. The reality is that the opposite happens. If we're really perfectionist about it, then what we end up doing is avoiding errors, which is not what we want to do. We need to have errors are crucial. We need to have errors in order to improve, because the errors are the things that are going to tell us something is not right, something needs to change. Let's put in steps in order to change that particular thing. The other part of perfectionism that can be dangerous is that we end up beating ourselves up quite a bit when we make a mistake or when we don't see the progress that we want. So put perfectionism aside, embrace errors, embrace mistakes. Remember, you're human, and the only way to improve is to make those errors and then to correct them. The next thing is sleep. The only way for the brain to consolidate all of this new information that we're doing in practice is to get enough sleep. Now, the recommendation for sleep generally is, for most people, which is 99% of the population, is 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Now, you may be thinking, oh, I'm an exception, I don't need that much. But a lot of the research shows that many people who feel like they're the exception are really not the exception. And then in general, please take care of yourself. You know, your health is extremely important. You want to think of your body health as your music health. So try not to sit all day long. That's just gonna give you lots of aches and pains, body problems. I've had all of these. So I've done all of these mistakes that I'm telling you not to make. So take it from me. Don't sit, take lots of breaks, mental breaks, physical breaks, stand up, move around, exercise often if you can. All of that is going to help you have more stamina when you practice. It's going to allow your brain to be more alert, to be more focused. So you're going to get way more out of your practice sessions. And then the last thing I want to mention, just to keep in mind, is to please remember to enjoy the path. I think if we spend way too much time focusing on our midterm and long-term goals, then practice can turn into a job. It can turn into like going to the gym and lifting weights if you don't like lifting weights. And then you end your practice session feeling like, oh man, that was really hard. I'm really tired. I'm exhausted. My hands hurt. What I do, and I think what could help you, is that even when I'm working on an hour of technique, which is pretty much every morning session of mine, every technical exercise that I do, I make it a point to make them extremely musical. Like I'll close my eyes and I'll get into the music, try to make interesting dynamic shapes, change my tone. I'm like, I really try to enjoy the music that I'm making, the sound of the notes that I'm making, even if it's just a simple repeated arpeggio. Do your best to enjoy the path, because you're going to be on the path significantly longer than you will be when you reach your goal. The goal is just an instant, just a moment. And you may be able to play Guajira de Lucia for a year, but it could have taken you 2 years to get to that point, right? So enjoy the path. Please, you're going to get way more out of it. Now, of course, one way to help you stay on the right path and to help you continue to enjoy your path is to organize your practice time effectively, which is exactly what I cover in the next video on the screen, where I break down 3 different practice plans for you to work on. That's true even if you only have about 15 minutes of practice time. So make sure to check that out. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.